I was at North Central on third watch as a brand new senior corporal. I had 5-6 years on the department at that time. The call that I had received that night was a critical missing call involving a missing little girl, and so I'd responded to that call. This family comes towards me, and a father hands me his little girl that he had found floating in a swimming pool, in an apartment complex swimming pool, and so trying to do CPR on the little girl, trying to get the family members, the number they were growing. There was, it started off with, there was probably 15, 20, and everyone was praying and crying, and I was trying to eventually just trying to do all I could to save this little girl's life, and hoping the entire time that she was going to just like in the movies, just wake up and spit up a bunch of water, and all of a sudden everybody's going to be celebrating, and of course that didn't happen. So the ambulance gets there, and then they start working on her, and the scene just kind of flashes in my mind, a few different scenes of the hospital scene where the medical staff are all working on her, and then a scene where they notify the family that their daughter had not survived. So this happened on my Monday, and so I had 5 days to go to get to my days off, and just kept trying to shake it. Just really, this feeling of just kind of feeling sad. Just felt sad for this family. I couldn't imagine, and it carried on for several days, for at least 3 days. And it wasn't until the fourth day that I was pulled over somewhere. I was writing a report, and I got a message from Lee Bollinger, was the police officer that sent me a message to my computer and asked me what my location was. And if you know Lee, or if any of you guys Lee was he was definitely the kind of the crusty old police officer. He's had a lot of very negative, had a lot of opinions, and at the time I didn't really want to. He was probably the last person I wanted to talk to at the time. Just I didn't want to hear anything negative. So Lee pulls up window to window in my squad car, and very directly says, "Reuben, how are you?" And I says to him, "I'm fine, Lee." And he goes, he gets right into it. Says, "Reuben, that call you went to the other day, those can be tough." And I said, "Yeah, I wish I could have saved that little girl's life." And he says, "Reuben, 20 years ago, when I was a patrol officer in Central Patrol," he says, "I went to a car wreck where a little boy, a little 9-year-old boy, was in the bed of a pickup truck, and the pickup truck had rolled over on top of him." And he says, "That little boy was alive when I got to the scene." He says, "And I spoke to him." He says, eventually they lifted the truck up, and they rushed this little boy to the hospital. And he says, "Reuben, that little boy died." He says, "And I have spent the last 20 years of my career angry." He said, "I've been mad at my sergeant. I've been mad at the police chief. Been mad at the mayor, because I've been mad at this city." He says, "And I just don't want to see the same thing happen to you." And he says, "Why don't you go talk to somebody?" He specifically says, "You go to church. Go talk to somebody at your church." And I know that I said, okay. And that night I drove from meeting with Lee, I drove straight to a Catholic church that was down the way. And I knocked on the door, and it was late, I was on the evening shift, and I knocked on that door until someone answered, and a priest answered that night. And I talked to him, and I said, I can't really sleep, haven't been eating. Said, told him the story. Said, this little girl drowned. He says, "Reuben, did you know this little girl?" And I said, "No, I never knew her." He said, "Did you know the family?" I said, "Nope, never met him before." He says, "What you're describing is grief." He says, You're not eating, you're not sleeping." He goes, you're grieving for this family. He says, "What you're doing is you're asking God to give you some of this family's pain so that they don't have to carry it all themselves." He says to me, "That is protecting and serving at the highest level. That is going beyond the call of duty." We have deemed all of these calls routine for really 140 years in this police department, when in fact they are not routine. They're anything but routine. we're just kind of trying to bring to light this idea that if we continue to call those routine calls, then how in the world is a police officer going to feel comfortable coming forward and saying it's affected me? When I look at some of the stigmas that exist in our profession, the things like alcoholism, depression, anxiety, divorce, suicide, you can't help but wonder if that cumulative effect of that sadness or those tragedies or those griefs or those memories, those things that they're seeing, if cumulatively those aren't precursors to some of those stigmas like alcohol, depression, and anxiety. And if they are, this could be one of the biggest missteps in the American model of policing. I will say that there's been years and years of medical research that has talked about the effect of the stressors and effects of being a police officer. Academia world and scholars are writing about the effects of policing. And while it's great and we appreciate the attention and the awareness, the reality is that we don't need to know how stressful this job is. We're very, very familiar with it. We're all carrying the lumps to show it. Academia world and the medical world is not going to change policing. We are. No one else is. So if this thing's ever going to get done, it's going to get done by us. And every single police department that's listening to this needs to know that. We're the ones who are going to get this done. We're the ones who have to get it done.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community. And now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
Do you want to know who you are? Don't ask. Act. Action will delineate and define you. Thomas Jefferson. Welcome back, ATO family. Today we are going to discuss a familiar topic on this show: wellness. We are speaking with a guest who grew up in Floresville, Texas, and moved to Dallas at age 22 to become a Dallas police officer. Graduated in 1995 in Class 248. He was assigned to the Southwest Patrol Division. He has worked many assignments within Dallas Police Department, including narcotics, public integrity, major crimes unit, intelligence, and he has been a deputy chief over investigations. However, in fall of 2021, he began working on an assignment that would attempt to change the entire culture of the Dallas Police Department and help provide for those who save others. After many focus groups and research, this guest came up with one conclusion. There's not a police department in America that is more primed for a robust wellness unit that helps break stigmas and save lives and careers than the Dallas Police Department. Since 2016, the city and department have been reeling from July 7th. Every year we revisit this date and honor the fallen and quietly bury the feelings of the survivors as we must continue to serve the city. This story is about the creation of something lasting, something that will go on longer than this guest's career and go on longer than this podcast. It is our honor to welcome on Dallas Police Assistant Chief Reuben Ramirez. Dallas PD Assistant Chief Reuben Ramirez, thank you for joining us on this ATO stage.
Glad to be here.
All right. The great Danny Canetti is actually, we got him out off the APC and actually in with us today to talk. Great Sergeant Kent Wolverton's a part of this. Guys, thanks for being here.
You bet.
Chief, we're going to get into a lot of topics, and it's going to be very wellness heavy, but we're going to start off by talking with your early career down in South Texas. Young, Reuben, growing up, great family. We're going to talk about your family because you get pretty impressive family. You good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Where did you grow up?
Floresville, Texas, about 30 miles south of San Antonio.
Oh, wow. That's a long ways.
Yeah, heading towards Corpus Christi.
It's close to the border. What did home life look like in the Ramirez household?
Well, so my parents are farmers. My parents are, hay farmers. So we grew up farming. And, my dad is probably the hardest working man I've ever known in my life. I've never seen anyone with a work ethic like his. 76 years old, still farming. My mom is just one of the best human beings that exists. She's just a servant-hearted. She was a farmer's wife for one, which is tough enough as it is, and just gives endlessly. Just helps people, prays for people. She's a fantastic woman. So great mom and dad, both still alive. 75 and 76 years old, still living there. But it was good. It was good. Slow life. It's a small town. Mostly it's pretty much a farm town. A lot of peanut farmers, hay farmers. But yeah, it was a kind of a Friday Night Lights type, country town.
You have any siblings?
I do. I have an older brother. My older brother recently retired from the military. He was a colonel in the Air Force. I have a little sister who is a school teacher. She teaches English as a second language, and she's married to a 5A head football coach. Just actually got the job up here in Colleyville, so he's moving to the area. So it'll be nice to get some family up here. And my brother, after retiring, moved to San Antonio, and he and his wife live on the north side of San Antonio.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love San Antonio. The Riverwalk is just, man, that's one of my favorite places to go to relax.
Yeah, that's great.
So how did you get into having an interest in serving as a law enforcement, in the law enforcement field, growing up in a farming household?
Yeah, it's funny. Growing up in a small town like that, especially being a farmer's kid, it's like you can't wait to leave the small town. And then, ironically, now I feel like I can't wait to get back. But at the time, I wanted to, just wanted to leave and moved up to San Antonio. I was living with my brother for a while there, my brother and my cousin, and then started school, went to college. Didn't really follow that. College wasn't really my thing early on. I think I kind of, I was going to school every semester, and somehow or another, just the class load, I'd start dropping a class here and there, and thought I'd pick that up later. And anyway, just kind of did that for a few years, and I was recognizing that college wasn't really working for me. I didn't think, and I guess after a few years in, I should have been getting ready to graduate, and I didn't really, the numbers weren't adding up. But I realized that one morning that I was living in an apartment that my parents were paying for. I was driving a truck that my parents bought for me. My parents were paying for these things as long as I was going to school, and I don't know, just really, I knew that I wasn't really. I don't think that's what they meant when they said, as long as you're in school, and every semester I was really only finishing a class or two. And I read the newspaper that the Dallas police was having a job fair, and I convinced a few of my buddies, and we went out and inquired and eventually started the process. And that's kind of how, a few weeks later, most of my buddies all got weeded out for some reason or another. And I had that tentative offer to come to the Dallas Police Department as a recruit, and talked to my folks about it. And then next thing you know, I was driving to Dallas in the smallest U-Haul they had, because I didn't really have a lot of stuff, and looking for a place. Somehow I ended up in Grand Prairie of all places, and but that's how it started.
What was your perception of Dallas and Dallas PD whenever you applied? Back in the 95-ish?
Yeah, 95. 95 is when I started, December of 95. Oh, Dallas was I mean, it was like the ultimate big city, of everything from, I had never set foot and hadn't been in Dallas, but I loved the Dallas Cowboys. I think the TV show Dallas was probably a big influencer back then. And, but yeah, I mean, I thought the idea of moving to, a big city like Dallas, being a police officer here, it just sounded like it was filled with opportunity.
Well, growing up in a small town, did you think about doing the small town policing or going maybe in San Antonio? Did you consider that department or the departments around that?
Not early on. Early on, I didn't really, I never really had a real interest in it until I was out of, Floresville, living in San Antonio, going to college. And then I did have interest in it. Looked at several other departments, and this is probably a story that we hear a lot in Dallas. We applied for other Texas police departments. Dallas generally is really quick. They expedite, and so I was interested in San Antonio. I was probably more interested in Austin, and then but Dallas was the one that kind of gave me that offer early on. So
it was the biggest department too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So you get down here, you pack up the little U-Haul, and you get down here, then you start in the academy, and you start talk about that and about some things that happened in the academy.
The academy was probably not the best experience, just for a couple of reasons. The academy wasn't what you would expect a police academy to be. It's almost like a shopping center, and you guys know that. And so from like curb appeal, that's not there. But the class, what was interesting about our class was, we started off with a pretty good sized class. From what I recall, is about 40 people in our class, and it just seemed like everybody that I liked or would get along with was getting weeded out. And we were one of those classes that started with 40, and I think we only graduated 20 by the end of it. So it was just kind of like, man, you're up here, you don't know a lot of people in the first place. You're getting yelled at all the time, and just kind of going through that drill. And then the people you do like are slowly getting weeded out. So it wasn't about midway through, I started to wonder if I'd made the right choice. Started thinking maybe go back and get back on a tractor. I don't know.
Well, did you take that? Was that serious in your mind to like maybe walk away from it?
Yeah, I remember a time there where I started thinking that I just missed home. Kind of missed my friends and everybody. I didn't know anybody up here. And I remember having conversations with my folks, my dad, and I told him, hey, I don't know about this police academy thing. I think I might want to come back, and he said, he goes, okay. He goes, come on back. And he says, but as soon as you graduate, and he was very clear that you started this, you gave your commitment, and and so you're going to finish it out. And as soon as you graduate, if you don't want to be there, come on back home. And just kind of something to go along with that. Something that just it brings to memory is just one thing that my dad and my dad's dad, my grandpa, always talked about. Man, when I was growing up, was if you put our family name on something, you do it the best you can. You don't have to be perfect, but you have to do it the best that you can. And so I think that came out in his message that, hey, you started this, you committed to this, finish the academy first.
What year was that? What class number?
248, class 248. We started in December of 95.
Nice.
Where was the academy at that point?
It was on Redbird. Yeah, it was the same place it is now. So
yeah. Well, I remember we had that.
The temporary place.
Yeah, it was a temporary academy. We had like a painting on the wall. It's still in the break room, like the Academy of the Future. Because I started in January '97 and it's still there.
They're teasing you. This will be here in the future.
We haven't got there.
It has flying cars.
It had flying cars like the Jetsons. So when you get through the academy, and I mean clearly you decide to stay. So you make a decision. At some point, the academy started to appeal to you, right?
Yeah.
And you decide you get out there. And what division did you go to?
Yeah, so I started off at Southwest was my first assignment, and to your point about the academy starting to appeal to me, there are a couple of people in my class that I got to point out that really were probably the difference makers in why. I graduated with Mike Mata was in my class.
Who's he? I'm not familiar with. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, Mike. Who's now the president of the police association, and just he's still has always been a real good friend of mine. Frederick Frazier was in our class, and still a really good friend of mine. Strong guy, and there were a couple others, but yeah, that Jerry Wante was another one.
Oh, yeah.
SWAT operator. But yeah, so we, eventually you start to click and make some, some friends that you start, really kind of supporting each other through it. So it turned out okay. And by the end, I wasn't completely changed my mind about going back home, and was pretty excited about my first assignment at Southwest.
It's a pretty strong class. I mean, you Frederick and y'all both went to Southwest together, right?
Yep.
And Amada went over to Southeast, but that's a pretty stout lineup there, coming from one class.
Yeah, I'm proud of them, man. All of them.
Yeah. Their footprint here, just like yours, is going to be here long after you leave. So you've had many assignments. I listed off several in your intro, but I want to ask you, what was your favorite?
I think my favorite assignment was probably still narcotics. Narcotics is that was a good role, interesting role for sure.
Why is that?
Well, I think first part is kind of the obvious, that you take this, you get into this role where you're doing things that are completely counter to everything you've done up to that point. In your life, you're trying to hang out with the criminal element and fit in, and you're trying to figure out that piece, both physically, what you look like, and what you talk like, and those kinds of things. And I think it's like the ultimate challenge to get in there. And probably the reason that I enjoyed the assignment as much as I did was, again, it was a real good team of detectives there during that time. Some of those guys they just took it as it was their personal challenge to out hustle the hustlers, and that's kind of the philosophy. That was the culture down there, and they were good at it. So, you tried to be really good at that role, and it was a fantastic role to kind of beat people at their own game and get in there and make those bigger deals and those kinds of things. But it comes with a cost for sure. It's not an easy mind switch to get into.
Yeah, because you're kind of becoming somebody that you were brought up by your great parents to be the totally opposite. You're having to play a character in a role to go into a seedy environment.
What about a learning curve? Getting
Yeah.
up there, you weren't an inner city kid, so was there a learning curve as far as becoming someone in this criminal element?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I learned is that you will very likely not be able to go into someone else's turf, someone else's world, someone else's environment and beat them at it. So what becomes the objective is you have to figure out like the things that really are you, the things that you really do have in common, and almost try to exploit those things. And for me, it became this this challenge of I knew that I wanted to make money, for example. I knew that I worked extra jobs, before that and those kinds of things. So that was one similarity that I had as an undercover narc with the people in the narc world, is making money. So I kind of really exploited I'm just trying to, make a little extra money, hustling this stuff on the side just so I can pay off some bills. And so you kind of push that narrative, and it's hard for the bad guy to really detect that, because there is some truth within that space. And so, I think we had some success there. I think the learning curve and the piece that really starts to get you is that, in those assignments you have to lie a lot. And so if you don't lie a lot normally, or you try not to lie a lot, but then you're in a role where at least 8 hours a day you're lying, that can have a residual effect on you as well. And so I think those are the kind of things that make it real challenging. And they're not, those aren't mainstream things. Those are probably not things that you even talk about when you become a detective or you get into those roles, but they should be, because those things can, they start to affect the way you operate, the way you think, and then from there it kind of can snowball.
How hard was it for you to shut that off? Like shut off that role and go back to personal life?
Yeah, I think it was a lot harder than I probably thought at the time, and looking back, I think it was a lot harder, because I know that, for example, some of the guys that I went to narcotics with, all really good guys, really good character guys and all that, but I know, towards the end of I was there for about 5 years, and most of us were, And by the end of that 5-year run, I mean, we were all, casualties of something. We were either, our marriages were struggling, or, alcohol and other types of things. So, I think kind of drying out afterwards, is, you got to put some work in to level off for sure.
Did you promote to sergeant to leave?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Promoted to sergeant, and that's the reason I left. And I'll tell you, again, as I recall, back then, it was an assignment that I wasn't going to voluntarily leave, and I probably did a lot of, consideration about whether I wanted to even accept that promotion, because of how much at the time, I was really liking it. Looking back, when I left too, I promoted to sergeant, and I was transferred. My first assignment was Northeast on deep nights, and I remember thinking, okay, I got to figure out how to do my year and get back to narcs. That's really all I wanted to do. And it probably wasn't until about 6 months into that shift that I started thinking, maybe not, maybe it is, I don't need to go back there. And then I, fortunately with a couple of mentors and other people that had kind of said, hey, Reuben, you've already been there. You've already got that box checked in narcotics. Go somewhere else, kind of broaden out a little bit. And that turned out to be really some of the best advice that I was given. And just kind of taking 5-year stints at different assignments just kind of makes a career, flow, and you get the opportunity to learn a little bit more. And so, that turned out to be a good guidance.
I think that's pretty common, where people either don't want to promote because they love the assignment they're in, and then once they do promote, they think they want to go back. But if you've done something at the level of a senior corporal in our department and you have to go back as a supervisor, it's
not as fun, right?
It's drastically different. Well, I couldn't tell you. I didn't do anything fun really as a senior corporal, but it's not as much fun when you go back and supervise and you're put in different positions. But you can take the experiences you had and then apply them in other positions within the department. I think there's a whole lot of value in that. But at the same time, it is very valuable to have people who have experienced the detective side of things as a supervisor, because now you have somebody who actually understands why you're doing the things you're doing and what you're actually doing. And the learning curve for supervisors who have not experienced those things is pretty steep. Is that the word I'm looking for? Mm-hmm. More steep?
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying. I think a lot of guys want to go back to what they're doing, but I think that it's better for them to go someplace else and use the experiences that they have.
Yeah, that's so true. I think we get into these comfort zones and we think that's our safe place, and to some degree it is, but it's just kind of thinking about the bigger picture and just that opportunity to kind of grow and, like you said, apply that stuff you learned, apply it somewhere else, and then learn something new. It's just a piece of policing that we need. I think especially in some of the difficult assignments that we have here. Your child abuse cases, your homicide, there's probably no better example. SWAT, there's no better examples of, you get really good at these roles. And so it makes all the sense in the world for you to stay there or bypass a promotion to stay there, because you're a key player, you're a big contributor. But at some point, balancing out what is truly, more beneficial for you, your families and those things is where I think we need to make some tough decisions.
Did you find, Did you find that supervising friends and people you knew just as Reuben, you're up as sergeant? We're going to get into the role you're in now, because you're pretty high up from a sergeant level at this point. But how hard was it for you to start having to be a supervisor to friends and people that knew you before? Because I've seen it. I've seen some other people that can get too comfortable with, and I won't look at you as a supervisor, but sometimes a supervisor has to supervise and lead.
Yeah, I think like anyone, being a sergeant it's one of those roles where you when you become a sergeant, you want to be a good one, and usually our definition of good is like, I want to be the sergeant that looks out for the troops, and I want to be the sergeant that they like, and that's really you want to advocate for all the things that you saw as a PO or a corporal that weren't being done right. And those are all good things, but I think one of the big conflicts is we want to get along and be liked by our troops, and what our troops really need more than anything is they need somebody to lead them. They need somebody to be a good example, to be knowledgeable, to keep them out of trouble, and help guide them to have successful careers. That's what our troops need. They really don't need a friend in that role. They need somebody who's good and who cares. And so I think we struggle a lot of times as young supervisors, young sergeants, in that role, trying to find our niche. So it takes some reps before you start to get your niche and recognize that, yeah, I got friends and some of these roles and some acquaintances, but the reality is that the best thing that I can do for all of them is really try to be good at my role, to really be genuinely good at the role. And I think if you can accomplish that, the rest of them start to line up and the rest of the roles start to make sense.
It's like a mentorship. Basically, you have to be a mentor. So.
Yeah.
So you went to sergeant to lieutenant. Where did you work as a lieutenant, training lieutenant?
Lieutenant roles, I had a lot of good ones. I've had good ones throughout my career, really. Lieutenant, I was in criminal intelligence, major crimes, patrol. I was a patrol lieutenant in the Southeast on 3rd Watch, and I think that's about it.
Where did you go from lieutenant? What rank? Was the major rank going then?
Yeah, I promoted to major, and I guess it was like 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where was that at?
Well, I remember, one of my roles as a lieutenant was I was the legislative liaison, so I did that role for a few sessions, and I was in Austin when I got the call. I was in Austin at the legislative session when I got the call that I was being promoted to major, and so my first assignment was at Northwest Patrol. I was there for a little while, and then I think from there that's when I was transferred to Internal Affairs Division as the division commander of Internal Affairs. That's kind of a beast of an assignment for a number of different reasons. That's probably the most challenging, just because you're in this spot where you go in there knowing that, well, something needs to change about this division, and so you're trying to do your assessment, and it's like you get a lot of pressure externally that, hey, y'all are being too easy on cops, and you get a lot of pressure internally saying y'all are being too hard on cops, and then you got the associations and the police attorneys that are constantly trying to lobby and get things to change. So you're and then same thing from the chief. There's just a lot of pressures that continually happen in that role. It was not anything I ever really wanted to do. But it was definitely a learning experience for sure. Probably the most challenging major role I had.
You probably took some things away from it, from the way you manage and lead, right?
Yeah, definitely. And probably one of the things that gives you the biggest perspective or lens on is just the things that cops are dealing with, man. The things there's a lot of there's just a lot of pressures to the police role that you see it in your career and you see it in your surrounding, but in a role like that you're seeing it from everyone's. You're seeing all different types of things coming in, and you're seeing those trends and those patterns, and it just validates everything that's ever been written about the stressors of this job, and the conditions and things that we put our officers in. And yeah, it's a and then, again, so you're trying to kind of advocate and recognize those things, meanwhile trying to balance some of the other external, agendas and pressures and that, expectations that people have. And so, yeah, it really does. Man, I probably had, high blood pressure in that role. I was there for, I think, a little over 2 years, and was glad to get transferred out of there.
And when you left out of you got promoted to a 1-star chief?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you and I, when I was up in legal, you were the 1-star chief, the deputy chief that was over investigations and capers, and that included homicide, and SIU, sex assaults, and assaults, robbery. So you and I got to get pretty close on that because I was dealing with the case filing, and pretty much all of your detectives fell under that. So how was that role for you? I mean, going to that type of investigation, because, those are very high-profile cases.
Yeah. I like that role a lot. I think, it was eye-opening to see the caseloads that our detectives are carrying. Obviously, everyone knows that we all struggle with manpower and trying to, balance out, keeping enough of our officers balanced out at the follow-up roles as well as, the frontline roles. But in investigations, yeah, they were these guys are carrying heavy caseloads, assaults. It was unbelievable to manage those caseloads, along with, we don't have the best record management systems, and there's got to be some better tools out there that make all the different steps that you have to cover in those follow-up assignments just a little bit more streamlined and less tedious. And we didn't have them. The RMS system, you were the one teaching us that program, and it's just like, good gosh, man. I mean, these are cops, and we're not the most tech savvy people, by design, but we're using the least user friendly applications, and so you just get a really profound respect for the work that they do every day, and yeah, the high profile cases for sure. The casualty from an emotional standpoint that you take on when you're having to investigate, just domestic violence or sex assaults, these ag assaults and robberies, and then, of course, then you get into the pinnacles like the homicide and SIU that are investigating these police shootings, these homicides, and when you have to scrub those cases in today's world of investigations, where there is so much video evidence out there. First of all, there's so much evidence out there from digital evidence from cell phones, and but then you get into Ring doorbells, body cams, and pole cams, and all of the video that you've got to comb over, and in many cases your relationship with the victims and their families to try to understand the case. There's just an immense impact on the mind in those roles that again, I don't think gets recognized or acknowledged enough.
Now the detectives having to manage all that and collect all that and everything you just mentioned, as far as all these different outlets of evidence that that you didn't have to deal with that whenever you and I heard on, right? Yeah. Ring doorbells. So putting all that together, and then, as you said, our management databases, they're not the best, but it really is like polishing a turd and trying to make a procedure that is the most user-friendly that you work with what you have. And it's not easy, and especially when you have to grab evidence from all over. And some of the evidence you may not uncover it for months later. You didn't even know a Ring doorbell existed on an offense.
You've held every rank on this department except for 2 at this point. Which one was your favorite and why? And then when you're done answering that one, which one did you feel you had the most impact at?
Good questions. I think the one that I have the most impact in has been this one. I really like the assistant chief role. The bureau chief is it's a great role. That might be a factor of a couple other things as well. I do believe that our executive command staff is better than I've really seen, including our chief and our first assistants. I mean, we've got a really good balance up here, and I think it makes our ability to recognize things that processes need to be changed, to convey them up to the boss, and really get that approval to do it. It's just it's lean, it's available, it allows us to be successful, and so I think I've appreciated this role by far the most. As far as the what was it? Was it the most challenging or
your favorite?
My favorite. It's this one. It's being the bureau chief over tactical and special ops. There's no better bureau to be over. This is all the cool stuff. This is all the stuff that most people, I think when people think about going into policing, it's usually for one of the roles that falls in under this bureau. We from our SWAT operators to undercover, fugitive, vice, gangs. those are great roles. And then you have canine, mounted, drones, helicopter. It's just it's really it's by far my favorite.
That is really the premier, I would say, of the cool stuff. But I don't even know how to say it really, but I don't want to gloss over the detectives. We have a fantastic investigative services here. Our detectives solve cases at fantastic rates. I mean, they're just really good at what they do, and that allows the other groups to work even more. So
it's all symbiotic.
Yeah.
I mean, it all works together. And you've been, you're assistant chief. I want to describe what your role is now. Okay, well, as far as other departments across the country, they have different hierarchies. So we have Chief Eddie Garcia. He's a 4-star chief. We have one of those. Now, for the first time I've ever seen, we have two 3-star chiefs, right? And then now you're one of 5 2-star chiefs. And then it goes down to several deputy chiefs, and then to major and lieutenant and sergeant. And that's the hierarchy. So you're really close to the top. Yeah, you really are. And that's why I think your influence and what you're doing now, we're going to get to here in a minute. But what you're doing now really has been a driving force because of your influence on this department. So in fall of 2021, you got an assignment, and a lot of research had to be done by you. Can you describe what this was?
Yeah, in the fall of 2021, we were in. We had several IED investigations, I guess, that had come to be heard by the command staff, and they were, usually involving allegations of misconduct. They were officers basically that had been allegated on for something, and they were coming to their hearing in front of the executive command. And so what we noticed was there was just a real strong pattern of officers that were being having hearings for these 3 patterns, these three allegations, and it was usually something anger related, something relationship related, some either poor choice of relationship or some sort of disturbance within a relationship, or alcohol. And alcohol really was involved in almost all of them. And after one of the hearings in the fall of 2021, Chief looked over at me and said, Reuben, I want you to do an assessment of the department and find out what resources do we have available for our officers, and are those resources being utilized? And then he kind of added, just you give me just an overall state of where how the men and women are doing. And so I think he gave me a suspense day. He wanted it by the end of the year. And so anyway, that's when we set out to just kind of get some input from different groups throughout the department. We call them focus groups, but the reality is they were really just conversations. I just met with as many people as I could, as many watches, investigative groups, special ops groups, and just started having conversations about those things, about how are what kind of resources are you utilizing, or would you utilize the resources we have, and those conversations really are what were just eye-opening when we really started diving into some of the things that our officers were carrying.
You started looking into that. You basically had to take the temperature of the Dallas Police Department and come and diagnose a problem. And you've been on at that point, for 25 years in this culture. Were you surprised by some of the feedback you got of the state of the department, or were you already aware and seeing it within the groups you have worked? You've worked in and commanded several groups. Were you already thinking, God, this is a problem? Something needs to happen with this.
Yeah, I think when I look back, I knew that we were a hurting department. I've kind of felt that for a while, really for about the past 7 years. I felt that we were a department that had some deep scars and some things that had never really been healed. So for that reason, I was glad that the chief gave me this role to kind of look into it. I think the focus groups that I met with and the conversations I have really validated that. But I think what I was most surprised about during those conversations was that officers we had to wade through some difficult conversations. There was some blame, and there was some anger and some accusations about things that we didn't do, things we failed to do. Really, me as a police leader at the time, it was a lot of it was directed towards command, and so we had to wade through some of those conversations. But I think what surprised me the most is that once we acknowledged that we haven't done things right in this police department, and we have failed to recognize or to really even acknowledge in some cases some of the things that you're carrying, that we've been carrying. That officers started to open up, and that's when the real gold started to happen. As I look back, some real candid conversations about the emotional part of the job, the things that officers were carrying, and then it just became, man, like the floodgates. And I told Chief Garcia I need a little bit more time, but the early prognosis is not good. There's the early diagnosis is that there are some things that are wrong, and I remember him telling me, okay, just get it done. And so, I think the real eye-opening piece of those conversations, as I look back, was just that once we waded through some difficult conversations and really had to own, us as a command had to own some failures, but really just acknowledged the similarities in what we were carrying. That really people were willing to share their stories, and I have no doubt that it's because of that input from those groups that our program is where it is today.
Well, I think that our department's check engine light has been flickering for a while, but after July 7, 2016, I think it's been on since 2016. And was that incident a common theme in the conversations you were having with people?
Yeah, July 7th came up on almost every focus group. It came up, from the event itself to some of the failure to do anything differently afterwards was one of the things I heard a lot. One of the things that I heard that I think it really stunned me that I hadn't considered as far as the aftermath of that day was, and just so obviously everybody knows that about the downtown ambush July 7th, 2016, but and it was just a sucker punch. There was no other way to describe that. A haymaker came out of left field and it caught us off guard. But so the event gets handled, and then we are like the focal point of the entire country for several weeks. And the things that came up in these focus groups were, people talked about the entire country converged on our city, right? We had cops that were here answering our calls. They were doing our follow-up investigations. We had every type of therapy, from equine to emotional support dogs to every therapist. Everything was here. And for about the next 3 weeks, we were burying our officers. And the thing that happened after 3 weeks was what was stunning, was that after about 3 weeks of this incredible support from almost around the world, everyone left. Everyone had to go back to, and they had to, right? They couldn't answer our calls forever. But that when that message came up that we really didn't have a foundation of support here that kind of helped us say, okay, well, here's what you do next. You just continue to to visit with your counselor or your therapist or those things weren't in place, man. And so one of the things that we were really left with was like this feeling of, there's still protests still happening. There's still calls, and so we all really just did, I believe, the one thing that we knew to do, which was just go back to work. Just pretend it didn't happen and just try to grind it out and try to go. And I know, for myself, and I was a lieutenant at the time at Southeast on Third Watch, and I didn't know what to do. I had sent a squad, a response team to that protest that night, and I checked in on them just minutes before, and they were fine and everything, and then that event happens, and you see your team later on and they look like they've got that 1,000-yard stare, that everyone just, and that didn't go away. And I didn't know what to do for them either. And so again, it just seemed like the only thing that we knew to do was just dive into work and just try to work and see if we could, wish it away. And what we're finding now is that we never did. And, the effects of that night are still being felt on this police department today. And I don't know that they will go away.
No, those scars will always be here. Every year we get, we honor the fallen and we revisit that date, and this department in the city will forever. And especially the people that were on the department. And there's people that were long retired that still have, guilt and remorse that they couldn't be here to help. It's just a terrible incident. And yes, it was not putting that night in the rear view mirror for the department was not the best course of action. And that's what we did, because that's all we knew to do.
Yeah.
So after you did all this research and you got with the focus groups and you start sitting down with other people and putting a plan together, how did that look going back to Chief Garcia and say, hey, here's what I think we should do?
Yeah. So once I had done those focus groups and really started to get some information back, and I got to say that one of the things I did looking back that really helped a lot was I pulled a core group together, and just to kind of help me map out like, hey, here's what I'm hearing. And that core group was, Kylie Hawks was on it. She had done a lot of work post July 7th to try to build something like this back then, and she deserves to be acknowledged for all that she put together back then. But there wasn't, I don't know if it just because there wasn't the same appetite for this back then as there was with our, now. But, hers didn't get to, get off the ground. And Tina Schultz, Deputy Chief Schultz, was part of that core group. You were part of it, Danny, and it was really there that we really started to kind of map out what what we were going to need and what this thing might look like. And I went back to the chief, talked to him about it, and man, to his credit, I don't know, the guy's a visionary, but I told him, things are not good, and we've got to do something. And he says, tell me what you need. And I told him I need full-time resources. We need an actual unit that is going to, be designed for the sole purpose of supporting our men and women, something that is full-time, that's not voluntary. And, he asked how many resources. I told him, I think at the time I told him 6. I said 5 and a sergeant. And he says, I'll give you 5 and a sergeant and a lieutenant. And then, man, next thing you know, we were rolling.
Yeah, so I remember how surprised you were. You and I talked after he told you, yeah, I'll throw a lieutenant in there too. Mm-hmm. And I was shocked by that we were even getting the numbers, because I want to point out that traditionally most peer support models across the country are train a handful of people up. They're all volunteers, and they'll sit over on the sidelines, and if somebody needs them, then they'll be available. What you had a vision for, which is something different. It was proactive. Why did you want to break? You knew we had to get away from that traditional model and go the proactive route. Why did you feel that was needed?
Yeah, the reactive model, first of all, the peer support, that's generally what you hear throughout this country. Like, everyone talks about peer support, and first of all, I think that peer support is in desperate need of a rebranding. I think that we historical models of supporting our men and women through peer support didn't work. And so we'd probably all be better served to think about changing the name, just for optics standpoint, because if we're trying to sell this to our troops and we're calling it peer support, and they're thinking, well, peer support's been here forever, hadn't done anything, I don't know that that'll get us to where we need. And we do need to focus on the granular as it relates to mental health, to emotional support, to wellness. We gotta revamp. We don't need a new fresh coat of paint on it. We need to scrap it and build it. And so the reactive models of peer support, are all voluntary. And, I said, I like to say often, voluntary assignments are for bake sales and Santa cops. They're not for the emotional support and the mental health of our men and women and their families. So we didn't want to look like something that was just there waiting for our cops, and when they, until they get into a difficult time, an emotional time, or a crisis, God forbid. But we wanted to get out in front of it the best we could, and so we knew, we were trying to figure out a way to get in front of the crisis and to be proactive, because the proactive piece was going to be something that we were going to use as a preventative measure, like discontinue, and no longer are the days of waiting for people to be in a mental crisis before any type of support gets initiated. And then that's how, in part, how the checkpoint model was built or came up.
Yeah, so we talked about 7/7, and that incident was a very rare and unique incident, and for the world, and it's like when 9/11 happened, and then an incident like that, those mass casualty situations, and you have like a Uvalde and things that make the news and get worldwide attention. But I want to talk about the cumulative effect on constant exposure to trauma that police, fire, any first responder, paramedics, they deal with every day. That doesn't make the news. It's the constant cumulative effect of trauma. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, when we did, again, back to those focus groups, one of the things that came about that was really stunning after we had got through some of the difficult talks and July 7th and those types of conversations happened, one of the things that came out repeatedly was when officers were willing to share with me the things that they were carrying, the things that were difficult for them in policing. It was surprising that you didn't hear anything about the dangers of the job. You didn't hear about the fear or the bullets. Those things weren't what they mentioned. What they mentioned instead were things that surrounded the routine calls that we send them on every day. They talked about the fatality car crashes. They talked about the in a sense kind of graphic, but they talked about like the contorted bodies at fatality car crash scenes. They talked about driving through those intersections and always, visualizing that car crash and the position of the body every time they drove through, and that it stuck with them even when they're, later on when their families were driving through there or when their kids were driving. They talked about the sound of grieving mothers at homicide scenes. Some officers shared things like, just the sounds that they couldn't get out of their heads from just a mother learning of the death of their loved one. I heard things from detectives about the most difficult part of their job was giving death notifications, and they said things like, every time we don't get to solve a case, when the family member calls me for an update and I haven't solved their case, it's almost like I'm reopening that wound for them. And then SWAT operators, one of the things SWAT operators said in some of those discussions were the hostage, losing a hostage, and the second guessing of their steps and their progressions and the timing of them in those situations, and that they never forget that. And so, cumulatively, when you take those things right there, those aren't what most people think the difficulties of our job is. These are the things that our officers are carrying on their minds daily. And then if you look at that, cumulatively from a quarterly or from a yearly, and then you start tacking on, a 15-year officer or a 5, 10, 15, 20-year officer, that's a heavy load. But those were the things that were mentioned in these meetings that really told me that, our focus has got to be on the emotional part of this job. And I will tell you that, when I look at some of the stigmas that exist in our profession, the things like alcoholism, depression, anxiety, divorce, suicide, and you think about, you hold that up, side by side with what the kind of stuff that we were learning in our focus groups about the emotional part of this job, you can't help but wonder if that cumulative effect of that sadness or those tragedies or those griefs or those memories, those things that they're seeing, if cumulatively those aren't precursors to some of those stigmas like alcohol, depression, and anxiety. And if they are, and then this could be one of the biggest missteps in the American model of policing.
Yeah.
I think you nailed it.
Yep, you nailed that.
The big thing for me was never the visual. It was just, it seems like it's more the constant exposure to just poverty and the criminal element. You know, it's not the dangerous calls, it's not the traumatic calls. It's just almost a constant beat down, like you're carrying all that stress for other people also.
You know, if you think about cops that, you know, why we become cops, right? Probably, you know, probably almost to a unanimous degree, we come here because we want to help people, right? We come here because we want to protect, we want to serve. And how could you be a person who wants to protect and serve as a career and then go to areas where there's poverty and where there's sadness and where there's grief or tragedy and not be affected by it? Those things, they're counterintuitive. There's no way for you to be one and not extremely impacted by the other. And so it's like it spells a recipe for disaster if we're not adamant and intentional about building something proactive that supports that.
It's interesting Kent brings up just the exposure to poverty, because when I look back at my career, something that's really stuck out to me now is probably the best years I may have had so far on this department were on the CRT team in Southeast. Great time, just fantastic memories. But I look back and I was probably the angriest those years working, and I realize when I take a look in the rearview mirror on that, I think I was just worn down with seeing that poverty, or the only people we dealt with, we weren't really answering calls for innocent people asking for help. Instead, we were constantly going after shitheads, bad guys, and seeing the worst of humanity. And I was so tired of seeing kids in these trap houses with porn playing, dope everywhere, guns everywhere, nothing but thugs. And these kids are dropped off at like a daycare in these trap houses. Just seeing the worst of humanity just ground me down.
And it's weird because you feel like you're making your biggest impact by knocking that element out. But that's what takes the toll on you mentally is, I'm doing this, but man, I'm seeing it over and over and over.
Yeah, and it had the biggest effect on me, especially in home life, and it just hit on a head where I had to go have dinner with my wife and her family one night, and the conversation at the table to me was just so frivolous and so non-important to me. To me, and that's how I'm looking at it. It could have been important to them, but I just come from that environment and got into the restaurant, and I couldn't even focus on the family or pay attention. My mind was still back there dealing with that crap.
And I wonder, like, how many of our 70% divorce rate are attributed to that very thing that Danny just described, right? I mean, you go to see these things and you're already a person again who cares about stuff. So you're seeing this, and one of our most natural responses to it seems like is to get angry about it, to be upset about it. And then you go into your family life, and the last thing you want to do is bring some of the sadness or ugliness that you've seen into your home. And if you're really uneducated or unfamiliar with how to properly communicate, which none of us really, we're not born with that, then you do the one thing that you know to do, which is just not talk about it. Just isolate yourself a little bit. And man, I just can't help but think that that's not contributing to some of these numbers.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you also want to shield them from that side of humanity. Like Danny, and it's on your mind, and Danny's mind been on what he just experienced at work and dealing with that part of Dallas, and now he's at a nice dinner with his family, and they're talking. He's not even present because he is thinking. His mind is still back there, and because it's hard to get that out of your mind, but you don't want to talk about it because you don't want to expose them to what you're having to live through. And I think that being present, and then there's a lot of officers, they almost feel uncomfortable going home. They want to get back into work because in some ways, sadly, that becomes their normal and their comfort zone. Going home and coming down off their emotional highs and lows, that they're uncomfortable because they don't know how to communicate with their significant other because they,
And the anger grows in because I don't have space to talk and you're not listening correctly or you're not understanding. So the anger grows at home. So it's easier to just go back to work where guys understand because they're with me in this. They see this. They know what I'm thinking.
How many times have you been done at work, but you just sit there because you're not quite ready to drive home?
Oh, man.
And that's just a weird one. I thought it was just me, but after talking with you guys a little bit, I see it on everybody.
There's a decompression time that has to happen at work in order to transition back to home, because if it's too abrupt and you just get home, it's like, I can't do this.
But then you feel like a turd because you're like, I should be at home right now.
Yes.
But I'm just sitting here, and I know I can go home, but I'm just not quite ready to stand up and walk out yet.
And then how much does that kind of lend to alcohol becoming just the easiest solution, to just, have a drink or go hang out with the guys and have a drink. I mean, it's just like there's so many not healthy coping mechanisms that have been kind of almost ingrained in this culture that are just right there, readily available. Again, it just seems like a recipe for disaster.
Well, humans are, for the most part, they're social creatures, and when you put at a different level of police officers and first responders, they're their own type of human too, and and a lot of them they go out and socialize, and they can that's how they decompress, and a lot of times they use alcohol to excess, and that gets them down, and some people can get them down a road that that can ruin their marriage, ruin their career and life.
Yeah, we've
seen that recently.
Yeah, for sure. Alcohol is just, even if you're not doing it excessively, if it just becomes a habit in order to kind of quiet, the noise or just kind of take the frustration off a little bit, it over the course of, any amount of time, that habit is not the healthiest coping mechanism. But we really never even thought about building in or trying to build in, better, more front end or proactive coping mechanisms or techniques.
Well, a lot of it's education too. I mean, the education piece. We're going to get into checkpoints and the other pillars of the other prongs of the approach to wellness with the unit, but just the education piece, because I can't tell you how many, like recently, seminars and conferences I've been to. I listen to professionals. I listen to other peers. They don't even have to work in this city, talk about their life experience and how they fell apart and how they recover. And then I hear a doctor or a professional speak on it. I'm like, damn, I wish I had this 20 years ago. I wish I had this knowledge 20 years ago. And that's one thing we're doing as a proactive piece now, is we're getting out, educating officers, at least planting those seeds. That way, so, farming, you can plant a lot of seeds, but they don't always grow. But you don't know till you try to plant that seed, right? And that's what we're trying to do as a department.
Planting seeds, check engine light on. You're liking these metaphors?
I have a Rolodex of them today.
You guys are not amateurs. I'll downplay y'all self when I started.
So you got to go ahead. You got the green light to start this unit up. What was the selection process like for you of picking the right people, the right messengers to basically carry this message that you wanted to put out there?
Well, so, it was the idea of checkpoints came up even before we picked the personnel for the actual full-time wellness unit. And this part, is one of my favorites because, it was during some of those conversations that there was, and I'm going to put Danny on the spot here because Danny was part of this discussion. But when we were talking about wanting to build something that would truly help our officers, so that the next generation of police, at the very least, wasn't having to carry some of the things that we're carrying, and just try to give our officers a chance, for their marriages to survive, to have, an opportunity to have an improved quality of life. We came up with the idea of checkpoints, and so checkpoints were going to be something where we were going to recognize which calls were harmful or could be harmful. And based on our conversations and seeing those routine calls that officers mentioned, like the fatality car crashes and the suicides and the homicides, we were going to check on people. And so, I'm going to paraphrase some of it, but Danny was part of this conversation, and he said his response to that, to me saying that we wanted to do something that was proactive, that checked on people, and he says, if you build it that way, without the politics, without the big news stories or the celebrating ourselves, if you do it that way, I'll do it. And I remember I thought, man, if I could get Danny Canetti, a SWAT operator, to carry this message, this thing could reach or hit that piece where people actually, you can actually listen to it, or people actually, consider it. Because that's the Achilles heel of policing, is that you talked about earlier that you heard a doctor talk and you thought, man, why couldn't I have heard this 20 years ago? Probably the truth is 20 years ago you wouldn't have listened to it. You had to be at a point where it became interesting to you. For some of us, it depends who's giving the message. It depends. The deliverer is the person that's going to be the difference of whether I buy into this or believe in it or even give it a consideration or not. And so, Danny being willing to take this thing on, I knew that my role was now going to be, I'm just going to create a lane of cover for him. I'm going to get up front of this and give him the opportunity to have the autonomy to do what he needed to do or what he wanted to do, and just let him do it. And then there were three people that when we look back, there were only three people that were the three people we were looking at to be checkpoint officers at the time. So Danny was one of them. Joe, you were the other, and Derek Cheney. And I distinctly remember thinking, if I have Joe King, Danny Canetti, and Derek Cheney, this thing could work. And so, eventually, though, you three wound up building the entire checkpoint program, because I don't pick checkpoint officers. None of us pick you guys you have to be a checkpoint officer to pick a checkpoint officer. And so now we've gone from 3 of you to now 40 of you. And I believe, with 100% certainty, the only reason that we have momentum and that we're, being looked at, nationally now for this program is because the people who are carrying the mail on this they're people of character, they're people of integrity, people who have good reputations. And if you guys are willing to get out in front and tell somebody, hey, I just want to check on you, man, these calls can be tough. We've got counselors, we've got some resources. If you're interested in them, let me know. I'll give them to you. Just having that conversation, there's a layer of vulnerability, there's a layer of credibility that's all rolled into that small little checkpoint, and that's why this thing is moving.
I want to give you kudos too, as a 2-star assistant chief for DPD, is that I've been around a lot of chiefs, where there's Chief Elzy, Goldbeck. I mean, you name it. I've actually had dealings with, and Chief Brown. I've had dealings with certain chiefs, and not every chief is receptive to feedback from somebody that is at a much different, lower level than they are. And you, from the start of this, you've been receptive to every suggestion. You had an open mind to everything we've brought you from basically the ground floor level, and you've accepted it as opposed to dismissing it because of your rank.
Or I think a lot of the experience is, well, okay, the command staff would be receptive, but anyway, they're going to continue on with what they originally planned. And I think that was some of the anticipation, was you would take in all this, write it down, make notes, and kind of think about it and see how it would fit into the plan, not necessarily make that a part of the plan.
Yeah.
So I'd say the same with Joe, is kudos for you for taking everything into account and actually putting it into play and making it work.
Well, that's what a good coach does. I mean, you look at it, even relating to sports, a good coach puts their best players at positions and to succeed. And a lot of people, and a lot of commanders and different levels, being on this department, as long as I have, that it is kind of rare.
Let me ask you, why do you think you were selected for this position when there's a handful of chiefs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think at the time it was interesting. I was the bureau chief over tactical and special ops, and wellness doesn't really fit into that, that theme. At the time, I was actually going through something on my own that it made me probably the least qualified for it, I would think, just because I was kind of struggling with some stuff also. But I think ultimately Garcia tasked me with this because he I think he knew how much this subject meant to me, because when we would sit in these hearings, I don't know, I just you hear the struggles that people are carrying, and I just felt like it was part of something bigger, something that we were missing. Like, I feel like our cops, they know better than to be. I'm not making excuses for everyone. I get there's consequences for our actions. I get that, but cops know that they don't come to this profession and want to go drive drunk. They don't come to this profession and want to be in dysfunctional and anger-filled relationships. They don't want that. I felt like these things were a product of they were a byproduct of something else, and I think Garcia could tell that in some of my recommendations, maybe in some of my comments. But I'll tell you, man, I'm so glad he did, because this subject has, it's just really grabbed me. There's a drive and a motivation for this, and a drive and a motivation to get this thing to a place where we can truly start to help, and not only Dallas PD, but I think we have a responsibility when we have something that's good and that's working. We have a responsibility as a lead agency in this country to share that with other departments, and we're gonna push this one, man. We're gonna push it hard and try to bring some help to other.
We've had conversations before, you and I, and I've told both these guys also, but I kind of want to get it on the record here that I don't feel it would have been as successful if we didn't have the perfect storm that we have. Coming with Chief Garcia coming in like a wrecking ball and really just bringing life back into this agency that was a little bit static for a while there. Putting you on this assignment, and then the people that you selected from there, I don't know that it would have been successful. In fact, I'll say I don't think it would be successful if the people weren't lined up the way they are.
No, I completely agree. I've been in this with you almost since the beginning, when you reached out, and I can say that your passion for this it hasn't waned at all. It's only grown, and you got a ball rolling, and now it's an uphill battle. It always will be in this profession with all the stigmas, but you have not lost any steam. You've only gained steam, and you've actually pushed us. You pushed the unit, and now we're out there. We have agencies across the country reaching out because of you talk about putting out this message and softening a conversation on this topic and the importance of this topic. And it kind of is going to lead me into our next topic, is a manuscript you wrote for the IACP magazine. I want you to kind of explain what IACP is to the listener, because we have a lot of civilians that listen, and just kind of talk about that manuscript and what spurred you to do that.
Yeah, so IACP is the International Association of Chiefs of Police, biggest police organization in the world, and they have a magazine called Police Chief Magazine, which is subsequently the biggest police magazine in the world. This magazine goes out to 165 countries worldwide. It's definitely the top of that type of periodical. I was asked early this year from Jeff Spivey, who's a retired police chief of Irving. He now works for the Texas Peer Network. He was and he chairs a wellness committee for IACP. So he was asked to he was going to be the guest editor and was asked to find agencies that are doing things for wellness and have them submit an article about their program. And so he asked me to if I would be willing to do it. And so he actually asked Chief Garcia, and then it forwarded on to me, and so I said, yeah. So and we just started writing up what it is we were doing, and what our program was, and I sent it to him, and he, I guess, they sent it back, and they said, well, can you talk a little bit more about kind of a how-to guide, like how did y'all build your program, and they wanted just to know more about our program. So it turned out to be pretty lengthy Word document, but I covered everything. I covered why we built this program, what we saw in our early conversations, how checkpoints works, talked about the different that comprehensive approach around our full-time staff, and I submitted it. And so about a month or two later, I got an email from IACP, from Police Chief Magazine, just saying, congratulations, we've decided to publish your program in the May edition, the mental health edition of our magazine. And then they said, we want to talk with you to kind of edit this and kind of get a little bit more information. And so we volleyed it a little bit, and I added just more pieces of our program, including some of the data sets that we were starting to be able to capture from our checkpoints, and some of the updates on our alcohol rehabilitation program, and submitted it. And yeah, next thing you know, they said that we're gonna publish you guys, and I had to sign over some agreements that there was nothing plagiarized, that I was the original author, and that we wouldn't share it with anyone else, prior to them publishing it, that they'd be the first people to publish it. And so, again, it was just like, wow, it was I thought it was a pretty good acknowledgement that our program was something that, we might have something here.
Well, it definitely helps spread the message that we're trying to promote, not just within our own department, but other agencies out there, that they need to hear this for their own, men and women.
No, we've gotten a lot of emails in response to that article from agencies across the world,
coast to coast. We're getting, and even outside of the country, we're getting contacts from other law enforcement entities that want to know. Most of the people that reach out, they know why we're doing it. They see a need. They see and they're themselves struggling. They want to know how to do it. How a department our size is putting something like this together.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The discussion about wellness is just been had for a while now, and I think that everyone recognizes that there is value in something called wellness, and but I think what everyone is struggling with is where to start. How do you build one? And that's really the question that as this thing kind of continues to be out there, and our program starts to evolve, that's really what we want to help agencies do. We want to kind of give them a blueprint of what we did, to say, well, here's what worked for us, but here are some of the things that to consider when you're building a program, because every program has to be unique to your city. This isn't a cookie cutter thing. It's not a one size fits all. But really, that is the $1 million question. Is there's two of them. The first one is probably, how do I start? And then the real $1 million question is, how does it actually integrate? How does it actually get to the hands of the frontline men and women and give them something tangible that they can actually use, that will actually help them? And that's what I think we've managed to capture here. I
think that goes back to the original philosophy and mission, is get the right messengers and people pushing this, and that will, I said it earlier in Gordon's episode, if you build it, they will come, and that's what's happened. So idea to implementation is the name of the article, and it's right in the center of the IACP Chiefs magazine. It's like a 5-page article. It's very prominent in that magazine. I kind of want to break down. I want to almost do like somewhat of a book review on that article. And there's a 5-pronged approach we take in the wellness unit. Full-time staff, 1 lieutenant, a sergeant, and 4 troops. I'm one of those troops. We do surveys, quarterly surveys to gauge, taking the temperature of the department to see what they want and need, and we can see if we can try to accommodate and tailor what we're doing to those wants and needs. And the backbone, we've talked about it before, we keep mentioning the checkpoint model. I don't think we can mention it enough. I mean, Danny and Kent, you both, Danny was on the ground floor of the checkpoint model. Kent, you are now a checkpointer. Danny, why do you believe in the checkpoint process?
Well, for one, I think it's something organic and normal. I think it's something we normally do in our relationships, or we should be doing in our relationships, whether we're in police profession or not. And then partly, I think, from my experience too, and just a lot of things I've been through in policing, and I noticed in some of the critical incidents I've had, there's been certain people who have reached out, and it's made me know that obviously two things. One is that they're acknowledging what I went through, and then the second one is even if they don't fully know how to be capable of, they want to be there to help in any way they can. So as far as implementing the checkpoint system on the department, the way I saw it was I, back in the day, had mentors, the people of stature on this department that I looked up to and I thought were great cops. And it was important for me to be recognized by them, especially if I was going through something. And I thought that we could do the same for other officers here if they weren't getting that by chance. They should be. That's the thing is, in your own cultures and your work groups, whether you're in patrol or in the investigative unit or some kind of specialty operations, K9 or SWAT, you should have your core group of guys that take care of each other and do these things. But I also say sometimes being in those groups, sometimes there's a little less acknowledgement because, oh, well, this is the job we do. This is normal. Anyway, back to work. And so someone outside of those work groups contacting them, letting them know, hey, is there anything else I can do for you? I recognize what you're going through. I know someone else who's been through something similar. It's just opening their minds that there are options out there to talk or discuss about things, and just have other people who can relate to them in such a way to know that these thoughts don't have to remain just with them. They can be shared.
Yeah, in the checkpoint model, it basically, because we picked several people from different units that are very respected and a lot of high profile units. We have patrol all the way up to mounted to homicide to SWAT, command staff. They do checkpoints because you never know which some 2-year officer gets a call from Deputy Chief Schultz just to check on them. That means a lot to somebody. They're going to remember that. And there's a lot of people that respect you, Danny, and the SWAT unit from afar. They're on the outside looking in, and they don't have the connectivity that you have within that group. And a lot of people ultimately want to get to the unit you're in, or they want to get up to narcotics. And to have somebody, a leader and somebody that's respected from one of these units reaching out, that can mean a lot to some officers that are struggling.
So I remember you basically cornered me on the second floor.
I'm good at that.
This was different.
Oh, okay.
There was either a promotional ceremony or retirement that we were both at, and you came up and asked me if I wanted to be part of this. And initially I kind of didn't, because the traditional model of peer support I didn't really agree with. I didn't like it. It seemed it was ironic you said it was bake sales and Santa cops for volunteers, and the only thing I could think of for peer support was, like the bake sale thing, like, oh, you really are going to get together and have a little party. And I don't want to dismiss what they were doing, because I think they were in the right headspace, but I just don't agree with the way it was being done, and I don't feel like it was effective. So I didn't want to be part of something that was not effective.
You didn't want a cookie cutter program.
He didn't want to be in the thing that he knows all cops aren't buying into.
Yeah.
It's just I don't like to hitch my wagon to things that I don't think are going to be successful, right? There's no reason to just say you're doing something for the sake of saying you're doing it. So I was very hesitant initially, but after we talked about it for a couple minutes, and you said basically all we're doing is calling officers and talking to them about what they've been through, and I was like, I already do that. It's just I do it to people that I know. But now there's a pipeline of, hey, these people need to be talked to also, whether you know them or not. And I kind of just thought about it, and I was like, well, departmentally, historically at least, we haven't done a really good job of taking care of other officers. We piss on each other pretty good around here. And even like you can't say the department because the department is made up of people. So if the department's not doing something, then it's the people that aren't doing it, right? So we can't count on the department as an entity to call individuals. That's got to be people. So I said, if we're going to do it, why don't I do it? You know, why don't I put myself in the position where I would want somebody to contact me and somebody to be able to talk to me and just be a voice on the other end of the line. And I don't know that I carry any more influence than anybody else in this department. I really don't see myself in that light, but I do see myself as somebody who's been through enough stuff professionally to talk to you about that.
Think about that officer who has maybe a year on the street, very rookie, and maybe their sergeant just doesn't really care for him too much, and they maybe have 2 or 3 friends on that watch that they work with, and that's about it, and they're really not that established on the department. Who's going to check up on them? You know, do they have all those friends that are in other work groups that are police officers who can relate to them? Probably not. You know, they're new on the department, and whereas some people like us over the course of our career have made a lot of relationships on this department and people know who we are, there's going to be some of that checking in. And when we go through something, the first one comes to mind, Scott J being in the shooting a couple weeks ago. I would hope, and I think a lot of guys made contact with him, checked up on him, checked on his family, made sure that they got whatever kind of help they needed. But what about that 24-year-old kid who has 1 or 2 classmates that are on his watch, and that's it?
I want to speak, like you mentioned a 24-year-old kid, and Chief, you've told a story before about 26-year-old Reuben at Southwest. And I know you've already talked about it, but I think you cannot hear this enough. Can you talk about your exposure to a traumatic incident and also your exposure to what we now know as being a checkpoint?
So when I was assigned to Southwest, it was my first assignment. I promoted to senior corporal, and I was transferred up to North Central. And so I was at North Central on 3rd watch as a brand new senior corporal. I had 5-6 years on the department at that time. And the call that I had received that night was a critical missing call involving a missing little girl. And so I'd responded to that call, and I remember it just being an apartment complex. I was using the spotlight to try to find the apartment that corresponded with on the call sheet. And so anyway, I was approached by a large group of people that were running towards me, and I talked about this story once before, and I know it's kind of sometimes a difficult story to relay, but this family comes towards me, and a father hands me his little girl that he had found floating in a swimming pool, an apartment complex swimming pool. And so this was my I was trying to do CPR on the little girl, trying to get the family members, the number they were growing. There was, it started off with, there was probably 15, 20, and everyone was praying and crying. And I was trying to recall as best I could how you do CPR on a little girl, and, going through the steps and everything from, I knew an ambulance was on the way. I could hear it coming. I had a cover officer, Rios, that was on his way. And, just trying to do all I could to save this little girl's life, and hoping the entire time that she was going to just, like in the movies, just wake up and spit up a bunch of water, and all of a sudden, everybody's going to be celebrating. And of course that didn't happen. So the ambulance gets there, and then they start working on her, and the scene just kind of flashes in my mind, a few different scenes of the hospital scene where the medical staff are all working on her. And then a scene where they notify the family that their daughter had not survived. So it was really the days that followed that event that just didn't make a lot of sense to me. This was a critical missing call, although titled critical missing because of the age isn't really it's not the call that you would expect to have the after effects of something like that. That too, it was I had the after effects being that I wasn't really sleeping, and I couldn't really, lost appetite, couldn't really eat, and just lingered on for for several days. This happened on my Monday, and so I had 5 days to go to get to my days off, and just kept trying to shake it. Just really, this feeling of just kind of feeling sad. Just felt sad for this family. I couldn't imagine. Felt sad for the family. Felt down that I, couldn't save her life. That was really the thing that you almost feel like you get this opportunity to do something, and when it doesn't go the way you want to, it just kind of stuns you a little bit. And but I couldn't really shake it either, and it carried on for several days, for at least 3 days. And it wasn't until the fourth day that my sergeant, after detail, stopped me and just said, "Hey, Reuben, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, Sergeant, I'm okay." And so he's like, "Okay." And so, I was really able to dismiss him, really quickly, and got my keys in my squad car, and then went out in the field to patrol. And it wasn't until that night I was pulled over somewhere. I was writing a report, and I got a message from Lee Bollinger, was the police officer that sent me a message to my computer and asked me what my location was. And if you know Lee, or if any of you guys Lee was he was definitely the kind of the crusty old police officer. He's had a lot of very negative, had a lot of opinions, and at the time I didn't really want to. He was probably the last person I wanted to talk to at the time. Just I didn't want to hear anything negative. And so Lee pulls up window to window in my squad car, and very directly says, he says, "Reuben, how are you?" And I says to him, "I'm fine, Lee." And he goes, he gets right into it. Says, "Reuben, that call you went to the other day, those can be tough." And I said, yeah, I wish I could have saved that little girl's life. And he says, "Reuben, 20 years ago, when I was a patrol officer in Central Patrol," he says, "I went to a car wreck where a little boy, a little 9-year-old boy, was in the bed of a pickup truck, and the pickup truck had rolled over on top of him." And he says, "That little boy was alive when I got to the scene." He says, "And I spoke to him." He says, eventually they lifted the truck up, and they rushed this little boy to the hospital. And he says, "Reuben, that little boy died." He says, "And I have spent the last 20 years of my career angry." He said, "I've been mad at my sergeant. I've been mad at the police chief. Been mad at the mayor, because I've been mad at this city." He says, "And I just don't want to see the same thing happen to you." And he says, "Why don't you go talk to somebody?" He specifically says, "You go to church. Go talk to somebody at your church." And I know that I said, okay. And that night I drove from meeting with Lee, I drove straight to a Catholic church that was down the way. And I knocked on the door. And it was late, I was on the evening shift, and I knocked on that door until someone answered, and a priest answered that night. And I talked to him, and I said, I can't really sleep, haven't been eating. Said, told him the story. Said, this little girl drowned. And, he says, he says, "Reuben, did you know this little girl?" And I said, "No, I never knew her." And he said, "Did you know the family?" I said, "Nope, never met him before." And he says to me that, he says, "What you're describing is grief." And he says, "You're not eating, you're not sleeping." He goes, and you're grieving for this family. He says, "What you're doing is you're asking God to give you some of this family's pain so that they don't have to carry it all themselves." And he says to me, that is protecting and serving at the highest level. He's like, that is going beyond the call of duty. And I remember listening to him, and I didn't know whether I believed that or not, but what I did know was that it gave me a lens and perspective about a horrible event that I never would have been able to come up with on my own. I never would have been able to come up with that perspective. I didn't have a single friend at 25 years old or 26 years old that could have come up with that. but he did. And it gave me an opportunity to look at something horrible and kind of see some nobility in it, that I tried to do something for someone else. And that lens and perspective helped me. I'm not going to go as far as saying that it saved my life or anything like that, or the trajectory of my, life. But at that particular moment, it's exactly what I needed. It was a professional, perspective and lens. It allowed me to understand how difficult this job we do is, and how normal it is to feel the way that I was feeling, having seen that kind of sadness. And so I believe that what Lee Bollinger did, almost 22 years ago, was he reached out to me. I wasn't in a crisis at the time, but I was definitely heading towards one. I was just trying to get to my days off. On my days off, I could have put some distance on this thing. Could have gone out drinking with some, my buddies and packed this thing down somewhere deep and hope that it never come up again. But that what Lee did was, shared a personal anecdote with me about something he had been through. He gave me some guidance and told me what to do. He said, go talk to somebody. That was his guidance. And I did. And so this model of checkpoints that we built is mirrored off of what Lee Bollinger did, almost 22 years ago. And so I know this model works. And I challenge anyone to question us on it. This is a solution that we haven't had before, that can help, and it's simple and it's clean and it works.
Yeah, Chief, I know you don't like talking about that story, because the other day I've had the honor of watching you present to groups for the Chiefs Conference, as well as the Women of Policing Conference. You get up and you tell the story, and I could see a physical reaction when you're up there at that podium and you're telling the story. But I'm watching the crowd too react to what you're saying. And you have a good sized presentation. You show slides. You show stats. Anybody can find stats on police suicides. Anybody can find stats on anxiety in the first responder community, and depression and symptoms and alcohol related arrest. What is difficult to find is finding a assistant chief of police in one of the top 10 departments in the country being vulnerable and sharing a true story of a traumatic event that weighed on them at the time. And then now, 20 plus years later, you are trying to create a solution based on your true life events. And you're being vulnerable, sharing that story. And I was looking around the room. People walk out of that conference, they're not remembering a stat that you showed, I promise you. They're remembering the story of Delvine and how it affected you. And now you, as one of the leaders of the Dallas Police Department, you're coming up with solutions to help generations of officers combat the same thing that you combated at 26 years old.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I know that the story isn't the easiest for me to tell, and I know a lot of our officers have similar stories, and one of the about things that they've been through and experienced, and one of the things that really I find fascinating about our checkpoint model is that when you take people like we are, like the people we have assigned to checkpoints, and let's be very clear, our checkpoint officers these are not your run-of-the-mill police officers. These are people who have worked incredibly hard to get to the point where they are, and they have character and respect, and officer. They're the officers other officers want to talk to. When you get people like that who are willing to share their story, because most of our checkpoint officers are very open about the value in counseling. And they're very open about the things that they're carrying, the scars that they're carrying, the things that they have seen and things they wish they hadn't seen. They're being vulnerable in that position with all the character and all the accolades that they have. They're being vulnerable and in an effort to help younger officers or other officers not go through some of the same pitfalls they are. That's powerful. when you can capture that, harness that, and you have those officers that are willing to do that vulnerability, there's so much strength in it that that is the reason that, again, that we're seeing some of the officers come forward, and some of the numbers on officers that are coming forward and responding to the checkpoint.
Yeah, I keep the statistics. We de-identify all the statistics for the checkpoints and the wellness unit, and I kind of have a statistical breakdown: what part of the division, what watch they're working, what type of call that we're calling on. We have homicide, suicide, fatality, accident, and we have other category, and also anything dealing with a child offense. And so I keep those stats just for a number, so I could say that for the year that 50-something% were because of officers' exposure to a homicide or a violent scene. And, that's just used for statistical purposes. But I could say that since we've been doing this, gosh, it's been over almost 2,000 officers we have reached out. Some people we've called multiple times because they work a bad part of town, and they just respond to a lot of violent scenes. That we're right now hovering anywhere from 9 to 11% of officers that we've reached out to have actually asked for a counseling service or asked for some help. And sometimes it's not immediate. You might get off the phone with them, and then a couple of days later you might get a text or a phone call back saying, hey, we talked the other day. I think I'm ready now. And that's what we want to at least, again, plant that seed. And it doesn't work for everybody, and not everybody wants it at that time. But we want to show that we care, and we're available if and when you're ready.
Have you talked to Lee?
I reached out to him. Yeah, I let him know. The first time we talked about this briefly in that podcast, I reached out to him, let him know that I was going to share this story, and it was interesting. Well, I wanted to make sure that he recalled it that way too. I was like, hey, I know this happened a long time ago, but there was a time when we were at North Central, and you sent me this message, and he remembered it. And man, he says to me, Reuben, and I said, well, I want to make sure you don't mind I share that story and your name. And he says, Reuben, he goes, I'm just glad to know that something I did might be helping people. And I think when you talk to some of these retirees that are listeners, and I think when they look back on their careers, you see them on your podcast a lot. They coming back sharing stories that are really in the same wheelhouse. They're emotional stories that had an emotional, a secondary trauma piece that they've carried and that they've had scars from for a long time. And so I think there's so much value in kind of reaching out to our retirees and getting some of their insight and their perspective and guidance on how we make this program even better. I think they're a wealth of experience and knowledge that we could use.
Yeah, that's why I reach out to a lot of those guys, because I know that what they've experienced is valuable to generations of officers, because the next generation beyond us, they're going to experience the same thing they experience. The generations now and upcoming, they actually have things in place that can help them, unlike the veterans like Lee Bollinger or Steve Claggett or some of these veterans that hired on in the 60s and 70s and 80s and even 90s. They didn't have this available. So people hearing those stories of how they either coped or did not cope or did not deal with it properly, I think there's value in hearing other people's failures and successes from those failures. So that's why I want to continue this message. And you can't replace true experiences. You can go sit through classes all day, but until everybody here has gone through a traumatic incident, that most people that don't do this profession or do the first responder profession or military, they'll never go their whole life without experiencing some of the things we've seen multiple times.
Yeah, that's so true. We started pulling the stats now just to try to understand what we should respond to. And one of the things that we learned was the ratio in which our officers respond to loss of life calls, and it's stunning. It's stunning, and I don't know that I don't even know how different it is in smaller departments, because if there's fewer departments and you still have the officers, the rate of exposure to loss of life is consistent, and our Dallas police officers, I know that when I looked at those three categories, the suicides, homicides, and fatality car crashes, the ratio is high. And then when you add in there like unexplained deaths or natural deaths or you can build it how you can look at it how a number of different lenses, but you add child abuse or these other calls that we know are all harmful. The rate of exposure to these calls is really it's chart blowing. And our hope is that as we continue to build this program out, we're going to build almost a profile of our police officers, something that looks different from your normal profile of a police officer from an administrative standpoint or from a department standpoint. Is like it says you have this many years of service and this many commendations and this many complaints, and then you look at like a disposition of the complaint and as if somehow that's a real true lens of what it is to be a police officer, when the reality is I'd rather see a profile that talked about how many critical incidents they were assigned to, how many loss of life calls did they go to, how many suicides have they been to, fatality car crashes. Those things will give you a truer depiction of what that police officer is carrying. And my hope is that if that's available to officers, they'll look at that and maybe collectively through their with their families look at that and recognize that this is a lot from for a 5-year officer to have been to, and maybe us getting a counselor and that there'd be some value, and it'll help me be the person that I set out to be when I took on this profession.
Well, that goes into another part of one of the prongs of the wellness unit that you mentioned in the articles, the education piece. You cannot get enough education, whether it's from true testimonials from your peers or from outside resources like a Dr. T or somebody from Psych Services speaking to you. It's getting out front of it and giving education. And if you go and we train a lot as police officers. We go out, we train with firearms. We go and we could train on defensive tactics. What's the best way to handcuff somebody? But we really don't train on how to protect our mind and to deal with the mind is connected to the body, and your body's just one big machine. And if your brain is not working correctly, everything else is going to fall. So that's one of the pieces of the wellness unit is we go out and we teach the sergeant school, the new sergeant school. We have the field training officer school. We hit the rookies while they're in the academy. And then we have other in-service, but you go out and we keep spreading the gospel, in a way, is you going out talking about it on this podcast. I was talking about the wellness unit before it actually was put in place because I knew it was coming. And I wanted to keep planting that seed that this is going to happen. This is what we're going to do. But the education piece, you can never get enough of that. And you never know who's sitting in an audience that you might strike a chord with them. A counselor or a doctor or the presenter may be talking about an individual, and the person sitting there could be mentally checking off a box going, yes, that's me. Yep, that's me. That's me too. We've actually had that on the listeners of this podcast. They've sought counseling because of something they've heard. And that's what the education piece comes in. Because what we're talking about here, this is a form of education. It's a long form of conversation in hopes that it could resonate with somebody that maybe they would look at something through a different lens, just like you did when Lee talked to you, then you talked to the priest.
The formula of connecting with someone during, the timing of connecting with someone when they're in an emotional situation, whether they realize they are or not, and what you can implant, in a message or training is priceless, right? And that's one of the things that our program's trying to look into is that, we have deemed all of these calls routine for really 140 years in this police department, when in fact they are not routine. They're anything but routine. No services are ever initiated for a fatality car crash. No services are initiated for a homicide or for a suicide. But yet those are the calls that are affecting our police officers, not because of the call scene itself, but some of the other residual things that occur from it, just the images or the sounds and the smells and those kinds of things. So we're just kind of trying to bring to light this idea that if we continue to call those routine calls, then how in the world is a police officer going to feel comfortable coming forward and saying it's affected me, right? Because it's supposed to be routine. So this is, so what we do in checkpoints is get in front of it where we don't make them come forward and check and tell us they need help. We're going to go to them and see if they're okay. And along the way, we're going to give an opportunity to create a mentorship. We're going to give some resources, take all of the legwork out of it because our wellness unit is doing that. And at the very least, and this is probably one of our biggest successes, is that we are normalizing the discussion about the need for wellness and mental health and the cumulative effect of emotional trauma on our police department. And the reason I know we're doing that is because when we started our program last year, we were only operational for about a half a year. We did 800 checkpoints. And then this year, we've been averaging 200 checkpoints a month. Now, of course, we have a little bit of a glitch with this cyber attack and all that we're trying to sort out. But we're slated to do 2,400 checkpoints this year, 200 a month. That's 2,400 conversations that are encouraging, supporting. They're being given by people of influence, people who, potentially mentors. And they're either replacing a conversation that wasn't going to happen about this, or they are replacing a negative conversation that would have happened around this. So that, infusing of these types of conversations at that ratio, 2,400 a year, is absolutely going to manifest and have some sort of positive residual effect. There's no doubt.
Just like it did 22 years ago with Lee nudging you in a direction to go knock on that church's door.
Yeah.
That's what that's what the philosophy is.
Yeah.
And we're taking it a step further than just reaching out to the officers. We're also incorporating the families. We're having marriage workshops. We're having couples workshops, and we're having just education for family members too. We're reaching out for resources to hold these events and invite the spouses, significant other, partners, the kids, to get them connected so they better can understand what their first responder partner is going through and how maybe they can deal with it, because they're suffering a lot of times. They're suffering along with them. You've mentioned the divorce rate. I mean, it's about 70% nationally for first responder divorce rate. There's the anxiety, the anger, the depression. Those are all symptoms of the grief. And people in emotion, the people don't realize how emotional this job is, and the ripple effect. And that goes well beyond the officers. There's plenty of officers that ruin their personal life because of what they're trying to deal with from their professional life.
Yeah, and the piece that gets left out of a lot of the discussion is how difficult it is to be married to a first responder. How our spouses watch TV and see things that are happening locally, and they don't know for a minute or two whether you're the one who has been at that scene. And then if you had been at that scene, they don't really know how to how to respond to it. And we've never done anything to educate them on how to respond to it, or we really haven't done anything for families. I think and I shouldn't say we, there probably has been some efforts in the past. Just in my time here, I don't recall any. So the family is really the first. They're the true first responders. Like they're the first layer of support that we have.
They're the first layer of a first responder's ecosystem.
Yeah.
Is the family, and then close friends, and the partner could usually be a sounding board, almost like a in-car counselor. But the family is a huge part of a first responder's ecosystem.
Yeah, and our program, because I know it gets a little confusing. It could get confusing for the listener too. Is our wellness unit, our full-time wellness unit, it has the reason why we believe that we need a full-time staff or as part of these programs is because there is that education piece where you're at the academy, where you're at the promotions,
the details.
Yes, and you're talking to brand newly promoted senior corporals, newly promoted sergeants, newly promoted lieutenants in their during their training, and you are reaching out to the family members and creating that support system and letting them know that everything that we are building in our support program is available to you too. It's available to the spouses. It's available to their children. The surveys, the newsletters, all of these things are all part of this robust, comprehensive approach that I think for a city like Dallas is absolutely needed. This is a major city police department that comes with all the hardened ground and hardened culture and all the bells and whistles to go with that hardened culture. And so we felt when we built our program, we needed to have a system that had all of the add-ons, all of the additions, and all the purpose of that is so that this department doesn't get a chance to forget that we're doing everything we can to support them. If they're not getting a checkpoint, they will, during a promotion, they'll or training class, they'll see us there. At the academy, they'll see us there. They'll get one of our newsletter updates. They'll get a survey in their box, so that we raise ourselves off of the mat here, which almost having been non-existent previously, to a certain level, and we know that we're not, biting off more than we can chew. We're always going to be there. There's always going to be newsletters, surveys. You're always going to see us at the details. These kinds of things have to continue to exist so that the officers see us, so that they don't forget about the importance of this. And then checkpoints, which is out here over on the side, that's just out there in front on the everyday, for the everyday officer that's responding to these calls. They're getting checked in on, so that there's just another mechanism of show of what this program isn't going away. And we really haven't even talked about the investigative side. Just recognizing that they need a layer of support for what they're doing every day too. So the full-time wellness unit is doing the investigative checkpoints along the way as well.
Yeah, we reach out to the investigative units. We have quarterly meetings with each unit, and we go over and sometimes it's people venting and people asking for things, and we go back and we put our heads together and we see if we can do it for them. That's why we're an entity that absorbs. We go out and we try to see if we can apply it to the unit, to the department. We keep harping on creating the right team, putting together the team to carry this message for a department, for city. And you got tasked with putting together the team. And I have to say that, before it actually was officially put together, I was helping out, but then you kind of talked me into joining it officially because we were allotted for 4 troops, a sergeant and a lieutenant. And you could talk on the first piece of that being put together, was the lieutenant part.
Yeah, I generally try to stay in the place where I want to pick the supervisor, or in this case the unit commander, and then let the unit commander pick the people that will report to them. I think there's value in that chemistry and really just kind of the whole selection process. So for us, identifying a unit commander became really our top priority. We knew that the chief was going to give us these resources. He had bumped us up in staffing. Like you said, it was 4 and a sergeant, and he bumped it up to 5, a sergeant and a lieutenant. So we knew we needed to get the unit commander right. And this was probably the biggest pick we were going to make. And we had our core group together. Again, Major Hawks was part of that, Chief Schultz, yourself, Danny, and I remember just going through the list of all the lieutenants. And there was about 80 of them on the list, and we went one by one just trying to figure out who was going to be the person that would take over this role. And we narrowed the list down. There were some absolute no's, there were some possibles, but we were able to narrow it down to just a handful. And when we looked at all those possibilities, there were some probationary issues and with others, and maybe some tenure. But Lieutenant Rivera was the one that just kept, it was the name that kept coming up, and everyone was eventually in our core group agreed that she would be the right person. She had the right demeanor. She had the right experience. We thought that, she was passionate about this type of work. And so we made the selection, and then then we have to reach out to them and see if it's a role that they want to take on, because like we've said, it's difficult starting new units. There's no template for it. We're having to put things together through trial and error and map it out. And anyway, we reached out to her, and she was interested in the role. So So then we had our unit commander.
Yeah, I was there. I remember going through that long list. I was thinking, I didn't realize we had that many lieutenants on the department.
Yeah.
And one thing that stood out with her is, like you said, everybody was kind of on the same thought processes. But what I thought about her is empathetic, compassionate, and supportive. And that is some of the models and descriptions you've used for this wellness unit since its inception.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just something that's, those are words that you don't hear in policing a lot. The empathy, compassion, support model. And I've said this before, policing is a very emotional profession, arguably the most emotional profession there is. And it is absolutely a very human profession. These are human beings underneath these uniforms, regardless of the superhuman work that they do every day. Those are core fundamentals of this job. And until we really recognize that, create that awareness, and respect those qualities, then I don't know that we're going to get the full potential or sustainability of our police officers. So yeah, she definitely embraced those qualities, and so she was willing to carry that message for us.
Yeah, and then the further the unit and start building the pieces, it was put out, open up for the department for people to apply. Sergeant Figueroa put his hat in the ring. He ended up being selected, and he is another individual that is he kind of has the look of a checkpointer. If he was not the sergeant of this unit, I believe he would be a checkpointer because of his experience and also his passion for helping others, and he's respected on this department. I think, like I said, I think that if he wasn't the sergeant over this unit, he would be a checkpointer.
Yeah, I agree, and credit to Fig in a lot of ways. He's a well-respected sergeant, and he's a troop. I mean, he's out there. He's got the the skins on the wall. He's been out there, and the troops respect that. And I think again the unit commander, she did a really good job of contrasting some of her strengths with who was going to be the supervisor over the unit, and I think between those two, they really do cover a good 360-degree look at how we can connect with our officers and the messages and the experience that we have, that each of them have, to be able to create the buy-in. And so yeah, she was, when she gave me her list of candidates, we went over her top few. She had a lot of good things to say about some of her top five, but it was Fig that she thought this is the guy I need. And so I said okay, and we went and we ran it by the chief, and chief was okay with it. He liked it if we liked it, and we were on our way.
Yeah, I'm glad he did. And then once I saw the top put in place by you, I said okay, I can get it. I can get in on this. I'm gonna get on this train. I got on, and then we picked David Massey and DeMarcus Black and Nicole Glass, and we just recently got Sasha Kim. She's going to be the new peer support coordinator, and Sasha's a rock star. She has been involved in the mental health field for a really long time. She is working on a career past Dallas PD, and she's passionate about it, and I'm really happy to have her on board. Yeah,
we always hear a lot of good things about her, and really all of the team. So yeah, they got it done. I mean, credit to the unit commander and her pick with the supervisor and everyone else for coming together and putting together a really well-rounded team that after a year of operation is really getting it done at an extremely high level.
We've talked about the IACP article and the prongs of the wellness unit, and from checkpoints to the education piece to Chief Garcia allocating, putting together a full-time team to dedicate to this initiative. How can other agencies across the country, how can they put something like this together? What are some of the best transferable policies and procedures we do that other department can do at any size?
I think there's value in any agency that is really wanting to build something, wanting to implement a program, a wellness program, to first just take a look at some of the behaviors that you're having within your department, not just the one incident that you just addressed, not just a recent DWI, but really look at a historical, get a real good snapshot of what your department has experienced. And that should include, areas of misconduct. That should include, deadly force confrontations, shootings that your officers have been involved in, near misses, threats and attacks against officers. I personally think it should include some of the politics and some of the climate that we've all endured in American policing over the last couple of years. But you should look at some of the politics within your particular city and see how big of a narrative or a message of even things like defund and things like that, because those things do have an impact on your police officers. They're spirit killers. I think when you take that cumulative look from everything from what your department has endured, the kind of things that have manifested, the politics, even media market to an extent. When you live in a metropolitan area where you have a major media market, they can sometimes be relentless about missteps or mistakes or the things that a police officer has done wrong and run with it. And again, all of those things cumulatively can lend to kill the spirit or the morale of your PD. And this is not in my opinion. If you look at any city that is under consent decree in this country, there's almost immediately two things happen when a city goes under consent decree. Your morale lowers and a lot of your officers leave, which snowballs the morale issue. So these things are important. They matter to the men and women who are out there carrying the line every single day and trying to wade through some of the difficulties of policing. So that's one thing that you need to be equipped with before you go starting to talk to your officers. Let them know that you recognize this. Let them know what the historical is. Remind them of some of the things that you've captured. When showing that you did that due diligence can go a long way to getting your eventually your buy-in.
Well, I think one thing that I'm doing now that you have put the team together and put me in a position where I can assess resources that are around. I'm reaching out to marriage counselors or I'm finding resources for officers' children that's something I've never even considered. Like I've had some officers come in that, hey, I have a teen that's going through this. Can you help find something? Yes, absolutely I can. I had to find a form the other day for somebody to get for an officer to get a state license. I guess it's for a companion dog or therapy dog. I looked that up for them because that is my role now. And I think that if a unit is put together and that's what their job is, that they need to constantly network, constantly dig and research what's out there, because there is several resources out there that can help everybody for each individual need, because everybody they need something different. And it's been kind of eye-opening to me of actually seeing that and seeing all the just various issues that are coming up.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just kind of doing an assessment of the resources that are available in your area. One of the things that you'll find is there are a lot of resources out there that would really want to help, but we've never really created an avenue for them to be able to help. And if they have inquired one day, maybe they sent an email or saw a police officer or a chief somewhere and flagged them down, it doesn't really get to any movement. So that's got to be the wellness unit's role, or whoever's going to be in this position. Go look at what's available out there. Announce that you're looking for resources that are available. You'll be surprised how many people want to help, and give them that avenue. But not just so that we have a good contact list of resources, but also because we want to take the legwork out of our officers having to do that. That's one of the key pieces that we have to understand. We're trying to create a new standard in American policing for wellness. And one of the things that we're going to have to do is take the legwork out of it for our officers. They're too busy. They've got plenty of things going on. They've got their personal lives and family lives. They've got this beast of a role. They're trying to reduce crime with the trends and things we're seeing. They're trying to follow crime plans. They're trying to manage all the different schedules and just parts of being a police officer. Let's us take the legwork out of finding the resources, so we can serve them up. Whether it's through an online newsletter or just a buffet of here are all the resources we found for you. That will go a long way with your police department as well. Another transferable best practice is to hold those focus groups discussions. Do those after you've found resources that are available. Do those after you've looked at historical data and found the things that your officers and your department has been exposed to. Have those focus groups discussions and just remember that, really it's almost like one of those age-old adages. You better genuinely care about the mental health and the wellness of your police department if you're going to go have these conversations, because no one can sniff that out better than than cops. And so you go in there half-cocked with, some half-hearted message of how you're going to do this thing, you're not going to get any traction. Cops, we just haven't given them enough in the past in this space to really get them to be receptive. So, so have that information, that historical, but then ask them, what are the things you're carrying? What are the things that we've missed on? Some of those conversations are going to get heated, and they're going to you'll get some blame pointed at you, and you're going to have to, in a lot of ways, you're going to have to eat crow on it and just accept that we haven't done what we were supposed to do in this space. So wade through those difficult conversations. And that's when I think if you can withstand it and get through it, that's where you get to the gold. That's where you get to where you really start figuring out what it is they're carrying and understanding where we've missed, and then ultimately figuring out something that will really benefit them or really serve them. But it's got to 100% be genuine.
Well, that goes back to the original mission of picking the right messengers and carrying that torch for others to follow.
Yeah. And the last thing I'd say is if you are going to get something off the ground here, you're going to have buy-in from your troops. You hear a lot of talk, especially I do from the command levels, is that you got to have the command staff, and you got to have the command staff buy-in, and there's truth to that. But the command staff alone can't get this done, and we're very fortunate to have had a chief in our department who recognizes the need for it, who is willing to message this out, everything from videos to just discussions to emails about the importance of this. You absolutely need that in your police department. If you're going to get anything off the ground, you have to have the top of the organization buy into this. But most importantly, you're going to need buy-in from the true peers in this police department. That's what gets this. That's where the rubber meets the road on this. You've got to have buy-in from the peers, the people that other cops look up to, the people that other cops will listen to. Those are the people that are they're the real influential leaders within a PD, and in order for you to have success, you got to get their buy-in. They have to take ownership in this program. It's got to be built and pushed forward through them. The organic piece that we talked about, having our buy-in, our checkpoint officers that have kind of built their own team of checkpoint officers. That's a big part of it. But you can take it further. Our logo, the Officer Wellness and Longevity patch, it was written by, or drawn up and drafted by one of our own sketch artists. Our newsletter, you're the architect of the newsletter. There's got to be an organic piece where it's cops taking care of cops in order for this thing to really get where it needs to go. And then the last transferable best practice is you got to have a driver. I mean, plain and simple. If you have the chief buy-in, you're on your way. If you've done your research and your mind's right and you genuinely care about this, you can develop those informal leaders and get that buy-in from the ground level, the people that are going to carry this for you. But you got to have a driver after that. You got to have somebody that's going to pave the path to let everybody else do the pieces that they that you said you were going to do. Let them do the pieces that they said they do. If you do right, kind of like Danny mentioned earlier today, you can't just take a bunch of notes and then not get done. So you need a driver that's going to pave the path to let everyone else do and follow through and do the things that they want to do to help your department. If you have those things in place, you can absolutely move this thing forward. And the last thing I'll say about that is that because there's a lot of intimidation, I think, about the mountain, of taking on this type of role. And the truth is, we haven't spent anything in 1 year on our. We've spent the resources. We had to allocate the full-time resources, and yes, there's a cost associated with those salaries. But as far as dollar amounts and things that we've had to have in order to be able to provide something to our department, to our troops, we hadn't collected anything up until this recent donation that I'm sure we'll talk about shortly. But yeah, the first year almost in operations, we did this with just resources or with just officers, no money or funds tied to it.
Yeah, it is definitely just homegrown, organic. It's organic in nature and how it's evolved. But you do have to have a driver like yourself. You really have stayed honest. You put the wellness unit in place, but you've also stayed honest to make sure we're continuing that mission. Unlike other units that you go to, like when Danny went to SWAT or Kent went to SWAT or narcotics, those units have been long established. They're just another component to that machine. They can make it run very smoothly or add to it, but what they entered already existed. This unit's been unique, unlike anything I've been a part of, is that it literally had to be built from the foundation and built up. And we're still building it. We're not even a year in. We have to lay the foundation and solidify it and continue to lay on brick after brick and listen to our officers and have somebody like you that supports us and holds us accountable to keep our foot on the gas. And, I've been with you on this project from almost the beginning. And even before that, when you were in over investigations, I kind of worked with you some stuff dealing with case filing. I know that when you were handed this task, you were not 100% in mind, body, and soul. You were struggling, and you took this on. And I know that you were hurting whenever you took on this role. You needed something like this. We're all human. We all struggle, whether it's personal and professional.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, and yeah, I was going through a divorce at the time, and man, it was just it was really on the heels of the protests, and all of that was kind of all around that same time frame, and there was I was struggling myself, to be honest with you, and I thought it was ironic that I got tasked with it, but again, just like anything, looking back, it's just worked out. It's caused me to see things from a lens that I hadn't seen previously. I did see what divorce looks like, and I will tell you that for anybody who's been through one, that is a crisis, especially when you have kids, and there's a piece to that rocks you to your core, regardless of whether the marriage is it's a better idea to end the marriage. There's still a network of support that is severed there, and that thing hurts. And when there's kids involved, it's tenfold. And so again, recognizing that, I want to do all that we can to help strengthen our families. That's such an important piece. We look at the 70% divorce rate like it's just the norm. That's 70% of us are going through crisis, and I don't even know how many of that remaining 30% are really in the place where they want to be as well. So it caused me to see that lens, and for that, if I can do something to through this program to help, then it's worth its weight in gold. But there's other pieces that I realize how incredibly similar we all are. Whether you have stars on your collars or you just got a brand new badge out of the academy, we're 100% similar, man. We're 100% human. We are emotional people. We've got things going on in our personal lives that we carry into this profession. Our family's health is our children when they're not doing good in school, our marriages, or there's a number of different things that happen in our personal lives that first of all make us completely connected because we're all carrying them, but they're impactful. And these ideas that somehow or another, when you put on this uniform, that you are immune from the real human part of life is just a 100% lie. I mean, resilience, we talk about these things like they're, we've got to train officers in resilience. Like it's some sort of download, like we're a computer and, we go to an 8-hour block and somehow or another we're resilient. When the reality is resilience is more of a moving, it's on a moving scale, man. Sometimes we're resilient and then sometimes we're not. And so we're never going to be able to pinpoint perfectly when someone is carrying some struggles in their personal life. But we sure as hell can create a program that is consistently checking on people, consistently available to them, and do everything that we can to put our best foot forward to make people trust in it, make people believe in it, to know that it's there for them. And then, hopefully we can start improving the quality of life to our men and women. I'll tell you, policing is an incredibly noble profession, right? I mean, I love that police officers are willing to toe the line on this thing every single day, especially over what has happened, over the past few years in policing. But I'll tell you what else is incredibly noble is being a mom, being a dad, especially the mom and dad you set out to be, being a husband and wife, being the person that you wanted to be when you came into this profession. That's incredibly noble as well. And we got to make sure that we don't ever lose sight of that in this profession again.
Absolutely. So you've got we have like a year in to this, not even a year of this unit being formed. You put together a team to carry this mission, and we're still growing, we're learning, we're listening. You've written a manuscript that's been sent out to all the 165 countries. It's got a lot of eyes, and it's drummed a lot of buzz, and people are reaching out. You've written and pushed a bill through the Texas legislation we hadn't even touched on that's going to be for all officers in the state of Texas. And it's heading towards the governor's desk to be signed. The Dak Prescott Faith Fight Finish Foundation reached out to us, and they just gave us a donation of $150,000 just for Dallas PD employees, civilian and sworn, to help our mental health. I have to give Dak a huge thank you for the Faith Fight Finish. They have 4 pillars, and 2 of the pillars, this donation 100% is on target with the mental health and suicide prevention, and also bridging the gap between law enforcement and the communities they serve. That's 2 of the 4 pillars of the Dak Prescott Foundation. What do these achievements mean to you?
Well, I mean, just to continue on the Dak Prescott, the Faith Fight Finish Foundation. First of all, I can't say enough about their foundation and him as well. Whether regardless of what your view is on the Cowboys or football, that is a good human being. He is one of the best human beings that I've met, and I mean that because this guy, the pillars that you talked about, he doesn't just, it's not just a slogan for him. He is at those events all the time. And this is a guy, I don't know what his net worth or income is, but the guy is probably $100 million a year guy.
He's doing better than us.
Yeah. Just $100 million a year guy. And he spends his time, and because we've been to those events and we see them and they're real. He's going to these Christmas events for kids and giving out Christmas gifts. He's going to events and just handing out school stuff, or $1 million that he handed out to cancer for children, and hosting events. He's just constantly spending his time serving the community, and I've never met anybody like that who's got that platform that could be doing other things but chooses to do this. So yeah.
Well, I'll say one thing about Dak is this is somebody his mission has been spurred by his own personal trauma, from losing his brother through mental health. He lost a mental health battle. Dak is open about his own anxiety and depression issues. He believes in the mission, and he understands he's human. I don't care if you put on a badge. I don't care if you put on a helmet with a star on it. We're all human at core, and we all have the same problems, and we all have the same fight.
Yeah, 100%, man. And he is the epitome of just that strength and vulnerability. Being the quarterback of America's football team and getting out there and saying that it's okay to not be okay, and using his platform to bring that awareness. It's impressive for sure.
Joe's actually standing up with his hand over his heart like he's saying the Pledge of Allegiance when you said America's team.
This guy's going to run a route or something.
Yeah. Hey, there's no secret. I love the Cowboys. I love Dak. And I can't imagine the pressure it must be to be the quarterback of that team. I mean, you think about it. I know that we haven't seen a Super Bowl since you and I've been on the department chief, but every year, hey, I'm a Dak fan, and yeah, every year this is the year. But I thank you, Dak. Thank you, Faith Fight Finish Foundation, for coming to us and believing in our mission, and recognizing a problem and helping us out. Thank you.
Chief, this is, for some of the listeners, I'm sure this is a lot to take in. In your words, if you had to do the quick bullet points on this program being successful, what are the things that will make this a success for other agencies or departments?
Find the influential leaders. You've got them. Reach out to officers before they're in a crisis. We've got to discontinue the model of waiting for us to be in a crisis before any type of support is initiated. Encourage our officers to counseling. That's it. Counseling's out there. It's available. You can do it on your phone. You can do it in person. It works. Encourage them to counseling and make that counseling convenient and affordable. Find the counselors. Serve it up to our officers so they don't have to do the legwork to look for them, and get the funding to make it free for them and for their families. That's it.
Chief, I've been trying to get you on this podcast to do an episode just with you even before you start going through your divorce. Whenever I first started this up, actually I got an old bio from you from way back then, and then you start going through the personal stuff, and you're hesitant to come on to talk about yourself or even talk about the creation of this unit. And I'm going to ask again, everything that we've already talked about and everything I mentioned with the bill, you working with the Dak Prescott Foundation, you writing the manuscript, you being out in front of audiences speaking on this topic so passionately. What do these achievements mean to you? I'm going to ask you again.
Well, I think what it means to me the most is that we were right about this need, that we were right about being proactive, and that there's other people in broad ranges of whether it's business or charity or legislation who they've validated that for us now. You have Police Chief Magazine publishing our program and highlighting it to send it around the world. You've got a not profit foundation that donated us $150,000 for counseling for our police officers and for all our employees, our non-sworn as well, because they believed in this model and this program. And then you've got the state legislature who has sponsored a bill that really outlines the checkpoint model, that says police officers that have proactive programs that check on officers when they go to loss of life calls. And it actually mentions the bill, the 3 calls that we outlined, which is fatality, car crashes, suicides, and homicides, that someone will reach out to them and check on them. And if those participating agencies that do, they become eligible for, I believe it's $1.7 million in reimbursement for counseling, essentially making counseling available, making counseling free for Texas police officers. This is the framework. This is our program. And so, speaking about the program at some of the national conferences over the last year was really looking for feedback. I was really trying to figure out, did we really tap into something here that nobody else did? Did we really have something that could benefit? And so I was always in search of that feedback. And I think, to your question, that's what this means. It means that we do have something here that could change the standard for American policing and help our officers get to a better place. But I do have to say, yes, you asked me to do this a couple of times, and I was not. None of this gets done, by just any one person's initiative. There's a series of different things that have to happen to get this done. You take the bill, for example. I believe that if you don't have a Chief Garcia that has that just that name recognition that he does, bringing a bill to Austin with our police department and him helped us. Having Frederick Frazier, he's the author of this bill and or the sponsor of this bill, and he's dynamic, he's good, and that helps. Julio Gonzalez, our legislative affairs liaison, he took over my role as the coordinator in Austin. He's good. He works hard to create those lanes and smooth out the areas that need to be smoothed out so that our bill can continue doing what we want it to do. And so there's a lot of things that had to happen to get a bill written and passed through both chambers unanimously to now be heading to the governor's office. There's a lot of things that had to happen to get this manuscript written to be able to get it to a point where a publisher said, yeah, this is the program we're going to highlight. And there's a lot of things that have to happen for a foundation to donate $150,000 for the sole purpose of counseling to our police department.
No, you don't give yourself enough credit, and I want to say thank you for one, you let me be involved in this because this is something I'm passionate about, and Danny and Kent, thank y'all for getting involved with this so early on, because it's y'all are part of what has happened, whether it's by fate, luck, or just by design. Y'all are a big part of making this move forward, and I'm excited to see where it's going to be a year from now. I want to point out, too, that whatever we do, I mean, Chief, everybody in this room, we're closer to leaving the law enforcement, first responder profession than we are just starting up. And we've had our lifetime of critical incidents and trauma and frustrations and exposures to some of the things that we wouldn't wish on our worst enemy. This is what we're trying to do here in Dallas Police Department, is lay the groundwork for generations of officers to come after us. That's why I enjoy doing this podcast, memorializing people, incredible people that have amazing careers and are major contributors to society and the city of Dallas and beyond, to have their story out there for some young officer 20, 30 years from now can be on Spotify, can be on Apple Podcasts and go, oh, what's this law enforcement podcast? And they can hear you speak on officer wellness and the Dallas Police Department Wellness Unit years ago. That's where people are going to be educated in perpetuity from things we put together. And that's what I'm hoping. And I hope that this never loses traction and the mission and vision never runs out of gas in this city, because we need it. This city needs it, and this department needs it.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of the things we talked about over just the last year is, this idea that the next generation of police really create our biggest opportunity to change policing for good. Like, we have to get their buy-in. They're the eventual supervisors and chiefs of this police. So we've got to give a heavy dose of understanding to them what it is we're trying to create and get their buy-in. But we also have to make sure that we use our influence to talk to those officers that have the same tenure that we do. Those are relationships they've been built through the fire. We have strong relations with them. They're trusted. We got a lot of scars together, and we're carrying a lot together. But nobody is going to convince them other than us. So that's why we have to recognize that we have those leaders within our department, those informal leaders. We have the ability to do this, but it's not going to get done by anyone else. We've relied, and I'm not going to be critical of anyone, but I will say that there's been years and years of medical research that has talked about the effect of the stressors and effects of being a police officer. They've analyzed it and diagnosed it, from a million different angles. Academia world and scholars are writing about the effects of policing. And while it's great and we appreciate the attention and the awareness, the reality is that we don't need to know how stressful this job is. We're very, very familiar with it. We're all carrying the lumps to show it. Academia world and the medical world is not going to change policing. We are. No one else is. So if this thing's ever going to get done, it's going to get done by us. And every single police department that's listening to this needs to know that. We're the ones who are going to get this done. And we're the ones who have to get it done.
Chief, I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. I want to thank you for coming on here finally, getting you in here. I want to thank you for your leadership and your vision and you taking this and running with it from the start and not letting up on this department, on the city, and on the country of promoting this message for generations of law enforcement that's going to come through this city and beyond. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder. Together we'll run up from the bottom. Yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up